Welcome to Cooking the Feast. Today, we're taking some pretty nice high-end ingredients here and we're gonna have a feast. What's that? We're doing scallops. And not only just we're doing scallops with risotto and asparagus. Delicious. So, for the ingredients, of course, scallops and asparagus and, the stuff to season it with. But the arborio rice, this is for our risotto. And of course, the chicken stock, the butter, and the cheese. It's what makes it all delicious. So we're going to start off by taking our chicken stock, and we need to get it warm. We need to get it just about to boiling, so that when we add it to the rice, it will cook. Just make sure it doesn't boil over. That's all. Get it hot, and you'll be fine. So let's switch our attention to the asparagus. Asparagus has kind of a harder part at the end, so when you apply pressure to it like that, it will snap above the wooded part. It's really good. I mean, you want to keep that nice texture from the top, the stuff that you can actually chew nicely instead of the rough stuff at the bottom. So go ahead and get them all snapped off, and then we're going to want to lay them out because we are roasting some asparagus. So I'm using this Lodge carbon steel griddle as a baking sheet. You can use a regular one, that's fine. You'll also notice this kind of parchment paper under there just to help clean up the mess later. So to start, we'll get all of our olive oil and just drizzle it over, give it a good covering. So this is going to help it cook and help it get a nice texture on the outside, but it's also going to help with this salt and this pepper that we're grinding on there. So grind how much you want. I like a lot, so I go heavy-handed, but get it on there. And then we're just going to, let this sit for a while. We got some other ingredients to make, but look at that. You see all the seasoning? You see it sticking there? It's good. And so some of it's going to get on the pan and go to waste, but hey, that's what you get for convenience. So we're setting this aside, like I said, and we're going to work on the other ingredients for the risotto. We're going to start with 2 shallots here. So you can use onion, of course, but really like the taste of these shallots, especially with a, kind of a more culinary task, so like making risotto, but onion of course will work just fine. So we're going to dice it up. We're going to get small little pieces to go with the delicate texture of a risotto, and we're going to take it. So the shallots, they don't produce as much as an onion, so just kind of keep in mind that you'll need more shallot than you will a one large onion. So once you get this nice and cut up here, and I'd like to admire my handiwork, you will take a look and see we have nice little dices again, so that's going to help blend into the granules. Next, we got garlic. I'm doing 4 large cloves and going to smash them up here. So you can use the back of your knife here, and it helps to release the oils into it so you can kind of absorb it better into what you're using. We're going to go ahead and chop these up into little pieces as well. Kind of the same texture, as the onions and everything else. We want small ones that kind of blend in. The texture is one of the best things about risotto. It gets a nice creamy exterior, but it has all these fine and nice little particles, mostly the rice. And what you see here is I forgot the second shallot. So that's what 2 shallots cut up looks like, if to give you representation. So we got to get to the star of the show here, which is the scallops. I was able to find some fairly large scallops here, and I was very happy. So what we're going to do here is take these scallops, and we got to get the exterior dry on it. And how do you do that? Well, you see why it's laying on these paper towels? So that we can just press it down and we can get them dry. This is going to help with your searing. So the less moisture on the surface here, it'll start to steam when it gets hot, so you can get a lot of that off of it. You're really searing instead of steaming. And just like with the steak, that sear on the outside is what my favorite part is. The scallop is great, but having that texture and that extra flavor is fantastic. And of course, you can help get there with some salt on the outside as well. So let's get these salted and peppered up, and pretty liberally. I like a lot of flavoring on my scallops, so you kind of go with what you want. It's going to be a nice little saltiness on the outside to go with that light and delicateness of the scallop. So here, what we got is the start of a risotto. It takes the longest, so that's why we're going to focus on this and then gradually add the other two. I'm going to start off with olive oil, coat the bottom of this pan, and this is a saucier, so it has the nice sloped walls on it, and that's going to be helpful because we're going to be doing a lot of stirring. So once it's up to temperature, let's get our shallots in there. So just like with onions, we're going to cook these until they soften up a little bit. So just give them a nice little stir every once in a while so they don't burn, but you don't need to stir these constantly until they sweat down a little bit. But for the interest of interesting video, we're going to keep stirring them in it. After we get them a little soft, we're going to add our garlic in. And so get ready to have the best smell in the world, a little garlic and a little shallot mixing together into a perfect harmony. So fantastic smell. And so give these a minute or two so the garlic doesn't burn. And then we're going to add in some seasoning. So we're going to add a bunch of black pepper here. Start off with a teaspoon here because you can always add more later. And we're going to add a little salt to this as well. Not as much as the pepper, but we can always adjust as we go. So be tasting this at several points. Now we're going to get our butter in there. So after you get your seasoning in, let's get our butter down because this is going to add an immense amount of the risotto flavor. Bay leaves, get 2 of them in there. Make sure they aren't crispier than a cracker when you put them in because you probably need new bay leaves. So get that melted down. And now we're going to start. So not a lot of ways. There's other ways that like cook the rice a little bit and brown it. But most of the time you just usually add rice and water and that's kind of how you make it. But what we're going to do with this is we're going to get it coated in that butter mixture and we're going to cook this down a little bit. Spread it out into your pan once it's thoroughly mixed and give it a minute or so. You don't want it to burn, of course, but what you want to do is brown up the rice just slightly here, and it's going to help give it a nice flavoring. And it's like a, kind of like that, what do they say, like that woody and nutty mixture type of thing. That's what we're going for here. So we're going to give it another flattening and then let it cook a little bit more. So you don't want to mess around with it too much while it's cooking there. But of course, if you have any sign that's starting to burn, you definitely check it because you don't want to ruin the risotto at this point. So let's turn our stoves off. We're using gas because we're going to add 1 cup of white wine. And we don't want to set this all up in fire. So get your white wine in there and then add it to the rice. And of course, turn your stove back on. And we're going to cook this down until it is nice and absorbed in there. So that's a lot of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be adding liquid to this slowly and then cooking it down. So once the rice has absorbed, and you see how it's just gently coming back to where I swipe through it, it's not an immediate thing. That's how you know enough of the liquid's gone. And so we're gonna go to chicken stock at this point. And you see it's there, it's on the verge of boiling, it's hot, and we just add a ladle at a time right into the mixture. And it's gonna start almost immediately, kind of getting that liquid in there. And this is a good time here to put our asparagus. We're gonna put it in the oven because this risotto at this point, we still probably got another 15 minutes left or so. So again, once it's kind of dried up, take a ladle and let's put it in there. And you don't want to overflood this, so a ladle at a time, cooking it down. So probably between each ladle, it might be start out at a minute or 2, but then it might speed up. So really you're measuring this, it'll probably take about 17, 18, 19 minutes in there, but you want to make sure you have a lot of stock because you might take a little more than, the previous time, just depending on the factors of the rice. So it's always good to have a little extra broth there. And so this is part of the process. Just keep adding to it, keep stirring it, keep adding it another time. And then, you know what? When you thought it was done, another ladle here. Of course, this is all worth it in the end. We're only talking about like a little over 15 minutes here. So risotto is pretty special, so it's worth the wait. And at this point, we're getting close to it. I've tried a little bit, and it's still got just the slightest little chew into it, so I know it needs another couple minutes here. But the texture-wise, look at it. I mean, it is firmed up. The rice itself looks nice and tender. And at this point, I think it's good to go. I've cooked it down, and I'm going to add the finishing butter to it. This is really just going to help, shine it up, give the nice silky texture. And so to that, we're going to add some more flavoring, and this is why you don't need to add too much salt, as we get our Parmigiano in there. So nicely folded in there, and you'll notice that it's not quite as creamy as it was before. So if you want that really like that super silky fall like apart, this one has a little stick to it because of the cheese now. Just add a little more chicken stock in there, and it will be good. So while I'm heating up my pan for the scallops, it is now time to check our asparagus, and I've tried a little piece, and just visually, it is done. It's not overly wrinkly, it's not overly charred, and so the oil that gives a nice texture. It has just the slightest bit of crunch in it, and that's the way I like it. So once your pan, and I'm using a 12-inch Meissen stainless steel, is nice and hot, you see the smoke coming off the oil, that's how you know it's hot. Let's add these scallops to it. And so let's get these big guys on there. And we're gonna cook these for 2 minutes. Maybe these come out about 2.5 minutes, maybe closer to 3 just because they're bigger. But 2 minutes, check them. Let's see. All right, nice sear on there. It's good. If you want a little more color and your pan was hot, well, put them back on there just a little bit and see if you can get them a little darker. Of course, don't overcook these. These aren't good when they're overcooked. But look at this. Look how beautiful they're coming out there. So that's the value of a nice hot pan. Cast iron, carbon steel, both great alternatives here. In some ways better. But if you're making a sauce, stainless steel might be the way to go because you can get the fond on it. So add some butter to it after we've done a nice flip and cook 2 more minutes, but we're going to want to spoon this butter on. Why we're doing that is because the fat particles stick onto it while the liquid part of the butter goes away. So once these are cooked through, another 2 minutes or so, take a look at that. That looks good. And let's get these on a plate because we've cooked all of our ingredients and now it is time to serve it. So there is our work, and look how good that is. Nice sear on the outside. Definitely, that's the best part by far. So let's get a little risotto. Risotto's been sitting a little bit, but it's still plenty hot, so you'll probably still burn yourself. So that's why I like to get that out of the way first. Let's spread it out here and create a bed for our asparagus and our scallops. So get a nice handful here because we're feasting, and we're gonna plate it there. And you know what? We still need some scallops. So let's get 3 of our nicer looking ones. And there's 1, and there's 2. And then when we get the 3rd one on here, looks like we're ready to feast. So take a look at that. I want to finish it off and make it look like it's glistening with a little bit of the butter that was in the pan. So it's starting to cook down a little bit. It's getting kind of into that brown butter territory. And look at that, glistening all over the nice risotto and that delicious asparagus. So this is a pretty dynamic meal. You got a heavy risotto, you have a fresh asparagus, and then a decadent scallops. So there it is. So this is Cooking to Feast. I hope you enjoyed this, and subscribe for more.